Good afternoon, everyone. Good evening, good morning, wherever you are. Welcome to the Hospitality Resilience series. This is the 6th session in the series. My name is Jonathan Humphreys, co-founder and chairman of HOCUSO, and I'd like to introduce you to my co-host, Mr. John Hazan from Atlas Coaching and Events, and Mr. Chris Mumford from Service Leadership and HOCUSO. The previous sessions have been on adaptability, how to hone your gut instinct through nutrition, the importance of intention, mindset, sleep, how to reposition yourself, and now this session on mindfulness. It probably is no surprise to any of you that the hospitality sector has been one of the hardest hit sectors out there. And although we're seeing green shoots on the horizon, we now have the opportunity to rethink and reposition ourselves for a new future. The purpose of this Hospitality Resilience series was around helping executives build personal resilience and inner immunity to enable themselves to be better leaders and individuals for themselves, their teams, organizations, and society. I would like to say a big welcome to all of the Hospitality Resilience community who've joined us and followed us on this journey so far. I'd also like to say a big welcome to some of my colleagues from the Glion Institute of Higher Education, where I also have a hat in terms of education and specializations in asset management and development. We also have members from HIT Scotland here today, which is an organization helping people get back into the workforce in the hospitality space, and Springboard UK, which is also a similar initiative, and also members of the Hotel Asset Management Association here today. So we have new members joining our community. Just as a footnote, this session is being recorded and will be used as a video and podcast, an article for publication for your resources afterwards. And now, without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to John Hazans, who's going to give you an introduction to the purpose and context for today's session on mindfulness. Thank you very much, John.
Thanks, Jonathan. Yes, welcome everybody. The 6th edition. Very delighted you could join us today. So before I hand over to Chris to tell us more about our guest speaker Yves today, like Jonathan said, I think important to set some context. Well, what are we talking about here? As Jonathan said, this series looks at resilience, and it's not long before when we consider resilience, we consider stress as part of resilience and the effect it has on both body and mind. Our current VUCA world, more about that from Yves a bit later, provides the ideal breeding ground for concerns about our mental and physical health. And as ever, the question is, how do we manage this? What can help us get through this? And today's conversation and topic addresses just that. Yves has been applying mindfulness in the corporate space with great success for many years. And today we'll help shed light not only on the science of stress and our emotional response to change, but also how practicing mindfulness can help us in the management of this stress. We're delighted you could join us. We suggest you ask questions throughout. We invite you to ask questions. Use the chat function, and we will then pose those questions to Yves after his presentation. So do please feel free to interact with us throughout the session. If you want to stay on after the 60-minute discussion, then Yves is delighted to take further questions and maybe explore practices in mindfulness for a further 30 minutes after that. As Jono said, today's 60-minute session is being recorded and will appear afterwards in a number of ways, podcast, article, etc. So to tell us more about Yves, I will hand over to Chris. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John. Hi, everyone. We are incredibly fortunate to be joined by Yves Givel today. Apologies to those attending from Glion. Yves is a graduate of the École Hôtelière de Lausanne, but I'm sure you'll forgive him, and has enjoyed a distinguished career with Hyatt Hotels, working across pretty much most parts of the world, Europe, Middle East, Africa, Asia, the US, in a succession of HR leadership roles. Along the way, he's gained not only a master's, but also a doctorate in social sciences, for which his thesis focused on organizational learning organizations and leadership. In his current role, he is Senior Vice President, Human Resources, Europe, Africa, Middle East, and Southwest Asia, based out of Zurich. He's also a certified teacher with the Search Inside Yourself Leadership Institute. And he's a frequent speaker on mindfulness and mindful leadership and organizational learning. Yves has experienced firsthand the benefits of mindfulness and has also successfully brought mindfulness into the Hyatt leadership model and organizational culture, and which I'm sure we'll hear more about during the session. So let's get into it, Yves. I'm going to hand over to you and away we go.
Wow, what an introduction. Thanks very much, Chris. Let me just share my screen with you, and I'm going to start with a couple of slides just to get you into the mood, so to say, give you a little bit of background information. But before I do that, I would like to ask you a very simple question. In 2 words, just how are you feeling right now? I think we're all living the COVID crisis at the moment in different parts of the region, different parts of the world. But why don't you just open the chat and just type into your chat 2 words, how you feel. Buzzing. Great. Anybody else? A couple of words. How are you feeling? Not always easy to describe how we're feeling. It's an emotional thing and not always easy to access our emotional vocabulary. Stressed but motivated. Interesting. Scattered. Yes. Anxious. Nervous. Calm but a little stressed. Yeah. Yeah, if the sun shines, that sounds good. That's great. Fairly good, not bad. Stressed, excited. Thank you very much. And like I said, not always easy to describe how we feel, because accessing our emotions and finding words on how to describe how we feel is not easy. And for those of you who have watched Simon Sinek, who wrote the book Start With Why, he always says our emotional part of the brain has no capacity for language. And for those of you who don't believe me, if your partner asks you, why do you love me? And you try to find the right words, that's because that's your emotional part of the brain. I've long given up trying to answer that question because what comes out doesn't always make a lot of sense. So we're living in a world where, things are going crazy. We are connected 24/7. We have information flow that doesn't stop. We have information overload, and I'm sure many of us have felt this way very often. And if you imagine the way we individually are dealing with the world at the moment, being overwhelmed, being constantly challenged, have information coming all the time in, always connected, the world we're living in doesn't really help. And we mentioned the word VUCA before, and VUCA a year ago for me was just a word. I used to describe people, we're living in a VUCA world. It's a busy world. VUCA is actually a word that was coined by the American military. And the meaning of VUCA is really a world that is volatile, that is uncertain, that is complex, and that's ambiguous. And like I said a year ago, this was just a word, and I described it to people. Everybody sort of felt it. But if you think back of what happened in the last 12 to 14 months, depending on where you are in the world, this has really been a VUCA year for us. And I'd like to do a little social experiment with all of you now. And don't be afraid, it's not going to hurt. But I'd like you to do is just sitting up straight, find a comfortable position, having your both feet flat on the ground, your hands just very loose on your legs. And without doing anything else, just take a couple of deep breaths, breathing in through your nose, breathing out through your mouth. Let's just take 3 to 4 nice deep breaths. Breathing in, breathing out, breathing in, breathing out. The next time you breathe out, just gently close your eyes or lower your gaze, whatever you're comfortable with. And just go back to your normal breathing. But try to really feel your breath. Feel how the breath comes in when you breathe in. Feel the air going out as you breathe out. And maybe just find yourself an anchor, somewhere where you can truly sense your breath. Maybe that anchor is in your stomach as your stomach moves, or maybe that anchor is in your throat, your nostrils. And when you find that point, just stay with it for a little moment and truly feel the sensation of breathing in and breathing out. And every time you breathe out, you let go a little more. Let go of your morning, of your afternoon. Let go of emails, phone calls, webinars. And completely arrive here in this session. Relaxing your face. Relaxing your shoulders, your arms. And just for a little moment, enjoy not doing anything else than simply being here. You might feel a little warmth coming over your body. And then let go of any focus. Let go of any focus on your breath. Just simply be here. You know you're breathing in. You know you're breathing out. And just enjoying not doing anything else. And then bring your awareness slowly back into the room you're in, feeling your feet on the floor, feeling your hands on your knees. And take another nice deep breath. And when you're ready, gently open your eyes again. Now comes the second part of my little social experiment. And I'd like you to ask you again, 2 words, how are you feeling right now? Just open your chat again, plug it into the chat, and put in how you're feeling right now. Grounded, centered, very nice. Calm and collected, relaxed. Now, I'm not sure how much Jonathan is charging you for this, but I think that should cost you a lot of money if I can do that in 1 minute, or if you can do it in a minute. Calm and hungry. Thanks, Jean-Paul. I hope you look after your well-being and you have a little snack on the side. But thanks very much for your comments. Now, what we activated in your body is simply your what is called parasympathetic nervous system. You know, we made up in a variety of systems. We have our skeletal system, we have our muscle system, and we have our nervous system. And the 2 major nervous systems is your sympathetic nervous system and your parasympathetic nervous system. Your sympathetic nervous system gets activated when you're under stress. That's the nervous system that helps your body starting to issue adrenaline and gets you ready, fight, flight, freeze, all the stuff that happens when you're stressed. But at one stage, your body tells you, hey, Yves, now you have to calm down, you have to down-regulate. And that's when you start activating your parasympathetic nervous system. You can activate your parasympathetic nervous system simply by taking a couple of deep breaths. You can do practices, whether they're mindfulness-based or you can do yoga. Friends, very good friends, family, relationships, activate your parasympathetic nervous system. Pets, if you have pets at home, you're not allergic to them, it activates your parasympathetic nervous system. So that's all we did. And that's really where I'm coming from when I'm talking about little practices that can help you down-regulate in the world we live in. So hello, my name is Yves. I have been working for Hyatt on and off for a number of years. My background is hotel operations. I went to an amazing school, like Chris said. For those of you in Glion, you probably know I've spent a lot of time in Glion. I've been recruiting there for years and years and years. So I haven't forgotten you. I joined Hyatt for the first time about 28 years ago, so a long time ago. My background is hotel operations. I used to work in my parents' hotel for many years. I used to work as a chef. I still today, I love cooking. And from operations, moved into training, from training into HR, and then did a number of HR jobs, hotel level, area level. I was looking after HR for the Middle East for a couple of years. I was then director of talent acquisition for a region for a number of years, managed to get a role at our head office in Chicago, became head of talent management globally for some time, until I moved back into my favorite role, which is back in a region, and I'm now heading HR based in Zurich for an amazing region that covers over 40 countries in Europe, Africa, Middle East, and Southwest Asia. About 7 years ago, I ventured into the field of mindfulness. And at the time, I was heading global talent management, and I was working on our global leadership model. And at the same time, we were instilling a common purpose in Hyatt, a common purpose that centered around care. And we said at the center of care is empathy. And I really tried to get my head around, but how do you bring a purpose in a company, and what does that mean for leadership? And I attended a session with Simon Sinek that I mentioned before that was about finding your own purpose. And for me, that was sort of my first step into mindfulness, because this was a very deep exercise, trying to find what is your own purpose. We did a lot of practices, and those practices had a very profound effect on me. And I started researching a little more. I'm a nerd. I like to read. I like the research behind things. And I started reading a couple of books, and then just ripped off the Band-Aid and said, let me start practicing. And I started to develop my own regular mindfulness practice, which holds true until today. And after a couple of years, I moved into my role in Zurich. I thought, but why don't I talk to people about that? You know, this is great. I want to see what happens if I tell them they should do the same thing. And I had 25 of the top leaders of the region in front of me. And I told them, okay, let's go and do a breathing exercise. Needless to say, very mixed reactions. I had about 10 people who were sitting there and said, okay, let me try it out. And about 10 people looked at me as if I had completely lost it. And there were 5 people at the back of the room who continued working on the laptops. So a fairly frustrating experience. So I went back to the drawing board and started reading about other companies who try to bring mindfulness into their organization. And I read about Aetna, and I read about Google, and I read about Facebook, and I read about a couple of the other companies. And as I researched a little more about Google data, I came across this program called Search Inside Yourself. I went to the program, fabulous program, really loved it. It's a program that uses mindfulness practices to develop emotional intelligence, and all the practices are really grounded in research how our brains work. And I went a second time through the program, applied to become a teacher, went to the teacher training, spent nearly a year getting my teacher certification. And for the past 3 years now, I've started teaching this program within Hyatt. I also teach public programs. I'm actually teaching one in London, if it takes place later on this year. I teach in other companies as well. You might laugh, but I taught the program even with the World Health Organization right at the beginning of the pandemic. They needed it at the time. So I sort of live my own purpose. I have a busy job, but I'm living my own purpose by passing on my experiences. And that's really what I want to do today as well. Let's talk about stress. And I'm sure most of you are aware of the Mayo Clinic. So they define stress as the body's immediate reaction to a perceived threat, challenge, or scare. Now, the key word in here is perceived, because stress is not always real. It can be imaginary, it can be a perception, it can be a thought. If you're worried about something that might happen, you can very well get stressed. And stress is something very real, because stress has developed over thousands of years in us. It's part of our evolution. And stress was absolutely necessary for us for survival. I mean, you see the picture of the bear here. A couple of thousands years ago, you would come out of your cave and you see a bear. And you'll be very thankful to your system that sort of gets you ready to either fight, flight, or freeze, which basically means Either I'm going to be strong enough, it's a small bear, I'm going to fight him, or I'm going to be quick enough and I'm going to run away from the bear because he's limping, or I say, you know what, that thing is too big for me, I'm just going to play dead. So this is an evolutionary system that helped us to minimize threat and maximize rewards. There's only one little problem. Today, we don't encounter bears anymore and we don't live in caves anymore. But the same reactions happen in our body when I watch the news, I get an email, somebody cuts me off in traffic, the same system gets activated. And what gets activated really, we get activated emotionally, we get activated physically, we get activated cognitively. And sometimes I like people when they tell me, oh, Yves, I'm going to try to reduce stress. Oh, you can't really reduce stress. We live in the world we're living in. We're living in a VUCA world. What we can do is develop our awareness when we get stressed and help our body to down-regulate. Stress, just very simply the way it works is a situation comes up, you get stressed, your body starts issuing adrenaline, and adrenaline is very helpful. Because again, a couple of thousand years ago, if you decide you're going to fight that bear, adrenaline gives you strength, and it helps you in case you get injured, that your blood is coagulating much quicker, right? But at one stage, that threat is over, and your prefrontal cortex is going to send a signal to your emotional part of the brain and says, hey, danger is over, the bear ran away, everything is fine, calm down. At that moment, your body will issue cortisol, and cortisol helps you to down-regulate. It helps you to activate your parasympathetic nervous system. But guess what happens if we cannot down-regulate anymore? And this is really where stress, you have different levels of stress, because stress is not always bad. Stress can start, it increases a little bit. Not sure if anybody watched Masters last weekend, and you saw Matsuyama on his last putt, and he only won by one stroke, and he has like, if I don't hold that putt, I have to go out and play another hole. So he was probably somewhere in eustress, which comes from the word eudaimonia, which really is good stress. So you get a bit of adrenaline going, and you're focused, you're there. This is good stress. No? But even a golfer or any other sportsman needs to down-regulate. You can't always stay on top. And, it's very sad when I hear some of our younger leaders who tell me, oh, this is great. I like to be in the zone and I can power through that. I can work 40 hours, 50 hours, 60 hours a week. No, you cannot. You might do it, but your body doesn't. And down-regulating is absolutely critical. You have to find ways to down-regulate, because otherwise, if you get over that curve and you get into what is called distress, fatigue kicks in, exhaustion, burnout, breakdown. Burnout, very, very, very real. And for those of you who don't believe it, watch one of the latest articles in HBR where they talk about burnout and the effect it has on people. And some of you may also know, since 2019, the World Health Organization has classified workplace burnout as an official illness. It's a scary thing. And if we keep on having adrenaline in our body, cortisol being issued, but we don't downregulate, more cortisol being issued, and more cortisol being issued, that's when we get sick. And again, the ability to downregulate is very critical. I want to show you another slide here. And some of you may have seen this before. This is similar to the 6 stages of grief, because Kübler-Ross, she developed that model back in the 60s. And in case you have academics on this call here, I think it was 1969, but I could be wrong. But for many years, this model was misunderstood, because everybody thought everybody goes through the same stages of change or grief at the same pace. But what's actually happening is people go through those stages at different pace, in different order. Somebody can go one step forward and go one step backwards again. But the reason I'm showing you this is what we're living today, with all the change in the world, brings us through those different stages. And that definitely brings a lot of stress on us. And we need to have practices that help us to create that awareness, to see clearer what's going on in our mind, in our body, and in our environment. let's go back to the brain. So it's not very detailed here, but really the two main areas of the brain that come into play when we talk about resilience or emotion management is your limbic system, the emotional part of your brain, and is your cortex or your neocortex. And if you look at evolution, thousands of years ago, we used to have the old brain, the brainstem and the limbic system. That was like sort of like the dinosaur brain. And then over the years, we grew that second part on top of the brain, which is your prefrontal cortex, which allows you to reason and to regulate as well. Now, in case of stress, there is a threat. And again, that threat can be perceived. That threat can be, I'll give you an example. At 4 o'clock this afternoon in Switzerland, the government is going to announce the next steps, whether we're going to open up or whether we're going to close down further. That's going to create a lot of stress for a lot of people. So that's a threat. It's a threat to our system. And then this activates really our limbic system. That's our amygdala. For those of you who know, we have two amygdalas. And when you don't know where the amygdala is, if you sort of think about going through your eye and through your ear, where the two would meet, that's where the amygdala is, and you have two of them on the back. And the amygdala is constantly scanning the environment for danger for you. Again, one of those mechanisms that had us survive for so many years. So the amygdala is now scanning the environment and sends a signal to the prefrontal cortex and says, hey, I think I see a snake on the ground. I think we have to react. And then the prefrontal cortex looks at it and says, it's actually not a snake. It's actually a stick. So calm down, you can downregulate. Now, this is just an example. I'm exaggerating, of course, but this is how these two parts of the brain work together. Now, I'm sure many of you have been in situations where a threat arises and you get very nervous about it, you get anxious, and you start telling yourself all the bad things that could happen, and it gets worse and it gets bigger. This is when your amygdala gets hijacked. Or it could be in a relationship with a partner. You have a conversation and that conversation doesn't go well, and you say something and the other person says something and you say something back. And after a couple of minutes, you sort of wake up and you say, oh my God, what did I just say? This is when your amygdala gets hijacked. And again, it goes back to evolution, because when you came out of your cave and you saw a bear in front of you, you want your emotional part of the brain to react. You don't want the rational part of your brain to kick in. Because what would happen? Imagine you come out of the cave, there's a bear there, and the amygdala signals to the brain, hey, danger, we need to run or play dead or fight, And the prefrontal cortex says, let me look at that bear. Yeah, he's about 2 meters tall. That's quite big, a little smaller than what they usually should be. I like the color, it's brown, but way too late for you. So evolution made sure that our emotional part of the brain sort of paralyzes the rational part of the brain. And the only thing that can help us with that, so it doesn't happen today where we don't need that anymore, is awareness. The awareness that this happens, so we can increase the bandwidth of communication between these two parts of the brain. And that's an important concept when we think about resilience, because it means when we get stressed and we get more stressed and it gets worse, we need to have the awareness to see clearly what's going on in our brain and start rationalizing in order to reactivate our parasympathetic nervous system. So what is resilience? We call this the resilience series, and I like this definition here because he has two important parts. I think we all know resilience is about bouncing back from a challenging situation. But what I like here is the second part, is effectively adapt to change and thrive. Because although everybody says, oh, I wish the world would go back to normal, there is no back to normal. And I think we all know that. A number of things, they're here to stay. Some of them are good, some of them are less good. But resilience can help us, number one, to bounce back and then adapt to the new normal and start thriving with it. Because if we keep on questioning it, if we keep on having our emotional part of the brain activated, it keeps questioning, well, why are we doing this? I don't agree, don't want to do that. it doesn't help us to move forward. At one stage, we need a certain level of acceptance, and resilience can help us with that. So now you probably ask yourself, well, he's very smart, so how are we going to do that? And I have my own argument. My argument is awareness. A lot of what's happening in our mind, in our body, if we become aware of it, we can start navigating it. Emotions are very real. Emotions are physiological. We feel them in our body. But if we become aware and we don't become the emotion, but we experience the emotion, we can start navigating this environment. For those of you who are based in the UK, you might have heard of Mindfulness in UK, which was a major study that was commissioned by the UK government about bringing mindfulness into the healthcare system, into schools, education system, and into the business. And I have a really nice explanation or definition of mindfulness. They say mindfulness means paying attention to what's happening in the present moment, so right now, in the mind, the body, and your environment, with an attitude of curiosity and kindness. And I really like this definition because it really hits on all the points. It's the present moment, it's the mind, the body, and the environment, and it's the curiosity and kindness you want to bring to our awareness. Curious, maybe sometimes like a child, start questioning things. How does that feel? How does that smell? And kindness is really the engine of empathy, really dialing in with what we feel. And to give you a little taste, I'd like to do a small exercise with you. I'd like to introduce you to one of the practices we can use to foster awareness and attention. And it's called focused attention. It's a very helpful practice that helps you to stay better focused in whatever you do, become more aware of what's going on in your mind. And what's interesting in focused attention, we're not necessarily training attention or focus. So sometimes people, if I tell them, okay, let's go and train focus, they're going to take something, they try to focus on it, I'm focusing. That doesn't help them because you can't focus. The training happens is if you try to focus on something, after a couple of seconds, your awareness will wander away. And I'm sure many of you have read the Microsoft study around attention span. And you know that our human attention span at 8 seconds is about 2 seconds above a goldfish. And I'm telling you, after 8 seconds, your mind will start wandering. So what we try to train is not necessarily the focus, but it's once your awareness wanders and you become aware of it and redirect your attention, that's what we want to train. That's what is called meta attention. And meta attention is the key to concentration. Concentration, again, is not I'm concentrating, because that doesn't work. Concentration is I'm focused. Oh, I'm not focused anymore. Let me bring my focus back. I'm not focused anymore. Let me bring my focus back. That's how you work with focus and concentration. And the exercise we're going to do, I'm going to ask you, like we did at the beginning, to bring your focus to one point in your body that's fairly constant, which is the breath. Maybe find that anchor point again we talked about and just simply follow the breath. After a couple of seconds, your mind will start wandering. Thoughts will come out like, Jesus, how long is he going to do that? Or Jean-Paul will say, I'm still hungry. Or somebody else will say, I have an email to send. So you get distracted. Now, the interesting thing is you're not going to become aware of that distraction. It could be that you're distracted and it will take you a minute until you become aware, oh, I'm actually not focused anymore. So at one stage, you will notice your distraction and very simply reorient your attention back to your breath. And we're going to do this over and over and over again. Ready? Let's try that out. Take a comfortable position again. And again, you don't have to sit cross-legged like a yogi. It's very painful. Just find yourself a comfortable position. I always recommend have your 2 feet on the floor, hands on your legs, and find yourself a position where you're at the same time relaxed, but you're also attentive. And I say attentive so you don't fall asleep, but relaxed so you can sit for a couple of minutes. And then we start, like we did before, 2 or 3 nice deep breaths in through our nose, out through our mouth. And next time you breathe out, close your eyes or lower your gaze, whatever you feel comfortable with. And then try to find that anchor point again in your breath. And bring your full awareness to this point. Maybe that's in your stomach, maybe your lungs, your throat, your nostrils. Let's just stay with that feeling for a little moment as you relax your face, your shoulders, relaxing your arms, your hands. And just simply try to settle your mind and follow your breath. And then bring your awareness to your nostrils and see if you can feel the cooler air coming in and the warmer air going out as you breathe out. And just stay with this sensation for a couple of minutes, or at least a couple of breaths, as you breathe in and breathe out. And if your mind wanders, simply notice it and gently bring your awareness back to your breath, to your nostrils, feeling the cool air as you breathe in and the warmer air as you breathe out. And then bring your awareness to your stomach. And just bring some curiosity to how your stomach moves as you breathe in and you breathe out. Is it expanding as you breathe in? Contracting as you breathe out? Just stay with this movement of your stomach for a little moment. And again, if your mind wanders, just gently bring your awareness back to your breath and to the movement of your stomach. And then let go of any attention or any focus. Just simply enjoy being here. Note that you're breathing in. Know that you're breathing out. And as well here, if your mind wanders, just simply bring your awareness back and enjoy being here without doing anything else than knowing that you're breathing in, knowing that you're breathing out. And as you start to relax, just bring one thought to your mind, something you're grateful for. One thing today that you're grateful for. Maybe a person, an action. And then bring your awareness slowly back in the room you're in, feeling your feet on the floor, hands on your knees. Taking on a nice, deep, big breath. And when you're ready, gently open your eyes. So that was about 8 minutes. Seemed longer, right? Or shorter? Not sure. No. But we don't always have 8 minutes every day. Well, let's say I argue we always have, but some people will tell me, no, Yves, I don't have 8 minutes. So I give you the shortcut. The beauty in mindfulness is in mindfulness, we have dedicated practices and we have integrated practices. It's like going to the gym. If I want to lose weight, I want to get fit, I go to the gym. 3 times a week, 2 hours, I go to the gym. But I can also every day as I go to the office, take the stairs. That's an integrated practice. So the integrated practice for focused attention is what is called 3 breath. And it's as easy as what you can see here. You just simply take 3 breaths, and on the first breath, you bring awareness to your breath. Breathe in, you breathe out. On the second breath, you relax. And on the third breath, you just ask yourself the question, what's important right now? And you don't even have to answer yourself that question. It's just about thinking about it. Very easy practice. So now my dog stopped barking in the background, but from each the signal that I'm my last slide here. I hope you had a little relaxation, maybe see a little clearer what's going on in your mind, how you're feeling, and I'd be more than pleased to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Yves. That was wonderful. I'm sure I speak for many when I say I'm in a distinctly more relaxed state than when we started. We have indeed had some questions during that presentation. So if I may, I'll open up with the first one from Morena, who asks, what are your tips for increasing your own threshold for stress? i.e., how do we improve our response to stress?
Brain surgery? No. I think it's, I always have this here with me here. This is really nice. This is a snow globe that somebody gave me when I did one of the sessions. And this is how our mind works. This is how our mind is usually, right? Lots of snow, we can't see a lot. And if we can find a way to calm our mind, all of a sudden we can see more clearly. And the practices we do in mindfulness help us to see more clearly. They help us to foster the self-awareness that then allows us to start navigating our emotions. Because quite often stress is all based on our emotions, right? Emotions can be nice emotions, it can be joy, happiness, love, but it can also be anxiety, distress, hatred, envy. It can be a variety of things. Now, the interesting thing is stress is very physiological. It is in our body. Emotions are in our body. We feel them in our body. And there was a study that was done in Finland a couple of years ago by Numela, who found out that everybody feels the emotions in the same place in the body. And this is consistent across cultures. We express our emotions differently, but we all feel them in the same way. For example, if you think about anger, you're going to feel it in your hands, in your chest, in your throat, in your head. Everybody will feel it there, right? You feel love. It's all over your body. You have depression. There's an emptiness all over your body. So emotions are very real. And those practices help us to become aware that those emotions are present. And we can do this, what I call liberating shift from I am the emotion to experiencing the emotion. So instead of, I'm anxious or I am angry or I'm stressed, if I can do this shift towards I feel anger coming up, I'm experiencing anxiety, I experience stress coming up, this is when you can start navigating your emotions. When I say navigating, it's techniques like breathing techniques, try to downregulate your body, taking a couple of seconds to spend with your breath, reflect over something. This is how you can downregulate them. So does it increase my capacity for stress? Well, I don't necessarily want to increase my capacity to stress, but I want to have coping mechanisms to live with the stress I have. I wouldn't necessarily try to get more stress in my life just because I have those coping mechanisms. But I think having some of those healthy coping mechanisms can help you in living better with the stress that's already out there.
Thank you, Yves. We have a couple of questions coming in. One is around topic of acceptance. And then we've got another question on burnout, which we'll get to in a minute. But I think this one is a good one in terms of, this is from Patrick, and he's saying, how did you get your company's attention to the issue of mindfulness and that it's an imperative for integration into the corporation? And it was a question I had in the back of my mind. I think it's okay that you can do this on an individual basis, but then how, as a leader, can you allow for this to be accepted within the teams and the organizations? I guess there must be something around the benefits around this. And if you look at studies on transcendental meditation, they did it with school children in Chicago. They saw an increase in their grades. They did it in prisons, and they saw a decrease in violence. So I'm just wondering how you were able to get this accepted in the higher corporation as something that is now embraced. And how could you suggest to others that they could get this accepted within their own teams and organizations?
Yeah, I think there's a few things that come into play. I think number one, what does your company stand for? And again, I'm very lucky. I work for an organization that has a very healthy purpose, a purpose of care, caring for people so they can be their best. At the center of care is empathy. And we're in a hospitality industry. So this already really provides a really fruitful ground to bring in such practices. And then the second thing comes in about what is important for your organization: leadership, well-being, inclusion, all these things. And then to see where you can anchor practices like mindfulness. And I have to say, even though that we're globally embraced the practice about mindfulness because we're fostering well-being for our guests as much as we do for our colleagues. And we have a brand called Miraval that offers mindfulness retreats. We don't practice it for colleagues across all the regions. This is one of my passions that I brought into our region. So we sort of went a step further and we said, fine, it's not only there, but we also want to bring it into our organization in the area where I have control over. And then the next thing is, you talk about results. If you just come in and say, okay, hey, I want to practice mindfulness now, you're going to be in the same situation I was 3 years ago when I was in front of my 25 senior leaders. You have to be able to anchor it to something that people know and that you can show results. Like you said, Jonathan, where it's the prison or the education. For us, it was, okay, so what can mindfulness move? Number one, well-being, right? We look at our emotional well-being, which is becoming more and more important. So mindfulness is a key practice when we talk about our emotional well-being. So then let's look at a couple of other areas. Inclusion, right? Everybody talks about unconscious biases. And I love it when I get companies contacting me and says, oh, Yves, I'm going to sell you a program that eradicates unconscious biases. There's a reason they're called unconscious. But mindfulness practices can help you to become aware when those biases get activated, and you can become aware of how you can change your behaviors. You can't switch off your biases, but you become aware of it. So now all of a sudden, mindfulness has a foot in inclusion and diversity. So then I think about our purpose, empathy. Empathy is one of the key emotional intelligence skills that can be developed through mindfulness practices. Because awareness of how I feel can help us better understanding how other people feel. So all of a sudden I connect mindfulness to our purpose. So then maybe in your organization, it's important to be innovative, right? And you might have a design thinking process in place and you say, fine, it's all about fail early, fail often. That's difficult because you need resilience to fail. Well, mindfulness can help develop resilience, because resilience is an emotional intelligence skill as well. And then maybe you go to the next area and you say, okay, I want to have more agile teams as well. Everybody talks about agile today. I want to have agile teams that are innovative. So I need psychological safety in the teams. So teams can speak up, trying out new ideas. And how do I foster psychological safety? Trust, which is an emotional intelligence skills, which can be fostered through mindfulness. So the more you can start anchoring this practice into things that are important in an organization, the more you can start bringing it in. And this is not an overnight thing. I've been working at this now for the last 3 years. Last year, for the first time, I managed to develop what is called an impact report. where I took the results of 500 leaders that I've run through the Search Inside Yourself program over the last 3 years. And I was analyzing their survey results, pre-program, past program, to see what has moved. And it's mind-blowing. Yes, for those academics on the call, it's self-reported. There are limitations to these kind of research studies. But if you look at the results, they're very telling. So I think it's about the ability to anchor it to what's important and being able to show some results of what it can do for people.
Yves, I wondered if I could stay with the topic of how we might use this in a corporate sphere. I'm fascinated by the work of Richard Boyatzis in the neuroscience. I'm sure you've come across the positive and the negative emotional engagement. Is there a link here between, we're stepping into the kind of work of Carol Dweck and positive or growth mindset? Is there a link that you found between the use of mindfulness practices and leadership programs in encouraging or fostering that positive or growth mindset?
Absolutely. I mean, there's two aspects here. Let me go to the first part first, which is neuroscientific research. Over the past about 10 years, research around the effects of mindfulness and meditation in general has dramatically increased. I mean, it's increased by like 500% and more. And the reason is, number one, the technology that allows us to study the functions of the brain. They're much better today. You have fMRI scanners that can light up different areas of the brain. I recently read an article where they said they managed to trace a thought, which is quite amazing. But the other thing is a new concept that they discovered about 20 years ago that's called neuroplasticity. And neuroplasticity sort of went against everything that people talked about the brain. People always said, by the time you're 16, your brain is all formed, and from then onwards it's only going downhill. You're not going to learn that more. Your neurons are not going to regenerate. And this theory of neuroplasticity completely threw that theory out of the window, because neuroplasticity said your brain will continue to generate new cells and your neurons will continue firing and creating those new cells. The second thing that neuroplasticity has found out is that you can direct your attention to certain areas of the brain so that they become more developed. I'll give you an example. For those of you based in London, I'm sure you know how long it takes to get a taxi driving license in London. And not just the politics to get the license, but to learn all the streets. It takes about 18 months to 2 years. And it's very, very focused work in your prefrontal cortex to learn all the streets and everything. And research has shown that that kind of work has changed the thickness of gray matter in the prefrontal cortex. So neuroplasticity can actually develop areas of your brain. So if you translate this into meditation, which is at the end of the day training of our mind, we can actually train certain areas of our brain. And if you do this short term, people like myself who do this 15-20 minutes a day, it sort of it sort of becomes it can be a new behavior. But if you take a more advanced meditation teacher, for example, a Mathieu Ricard or somebody who meditates 20 hours a day, for them it actually becomes a trait, which means their brain change permanently. And that's very powerful if you think about it. And the theories of loving kindness meditation and what it can do to your brain and how you can become more compassionate by training certain areas of the brain is mind-blowing. And if you want to read up, you have Tanya Singer at the Max Planck Institute. You have a number of other researchers who have looked at the power of mindfulness practices to develop compassion. You see this all over the place. So yes, there's a lot of science behind it. And if you think of it along the lines of Carol Dweck, when she says fixed mindset versus growth mindset, an example comes to mind, a theory that talks about from where you're operating from. They talk about operating below the line and above the line. And operating below the line is our natural state. Quite often we're below the line. It's a closed mindset. We're threatened. Our ego feels threatened. Whereas if you go above the line, all of a sudden you want to learn, you're more open, and there's practices that bring you above the line. And there's a number of mindfulness practices, such as acceptance and self-compassion and a couple of others that help you to come above the line to really start creating this growth mindset that you can have. That was a long answer to a short question. Sorry.
So just to kind of pick up on that, and I'm just, before we kind of finish this main session, and I just remind everyone that we're going to have an additional half an hour for a more intimate Q&A session with Yves. So if you haven't had a question answered, please hang in there. But Yves, maybe just before we close the main session, as a takeaway, someone's new to this, what advice do you have as to how they get started? I mean, is it about, okay, I got to put in my diary, 15 minutes, 5 days a week, this is when I'm going to do it, develop the habit? Have you got any kind of pointers as to how to get into it?
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of frameworks about creating healthy habits. One of them is about you need to repeat something 20 times to create a habit. I probably would say do it for a month. So it's definitely about repetition. That's one thing. The second one is I would download an app. If you practice with an app or without an app, there's no big difference. And especially at the beginning, you want to learn how to do that. You want to be guided through it, and it makes it fun and easier. And then the most important thing is not having too many expectations. Maybe just go in there, start practicing it, and see how it feels. Now, you're not going to become a Maturika overnight, but you will start feeling the benefits. And I think using an app, doing it regularly at the same time, and then see what is the benefit, what's in it for you. This is how you create healthy habits. And even in my programs, I usually ask people to do a 28-day practice afterwards, where every day we give them a little practice. And you don't have to take 10, 15 minutes. It can be 2 minutes. It can be 3 minutes. The interesting thing is it's going to become like brushing your teeth, where you feel guilty if you don't do it. So that's very helpful to think about how to create a habit.
Yves, we've got a couple of questions which I'd like to address before we close. One of these topics I know is pretty close to your heart, on burnout. And I think it'd be helpful for the audience if we could explore this very important topic in more detail. You mentioned it as part of the curve that you showed in your presentation. You mentioned it as the fact it's obviously on the later stage of that curve. It's obviously very hard to come back from, right? So it's about how do we prevent rather than try and recover from. I think that's the big area. But the question is from Jan Oscar, and I think maybe we can expand on it. It's do you have advice for spotting burnout in others? I guess, what are the symptoms? Let's expand it a bit further. How do you recognize that trend in yourself? I mean, obviously, we're hopefully, in a position to now, through, these kind of sessions, create the kind of awareness that it's important. So I think it'd be helpful for the audience, that they could spot these trends either in others or themselves. And then also, what can people do about it once they start spotting these trends? And I know that you're working closely with people that have burnt out or in burnout or recovering from burnout. So I think it'd be nice to just expand this important topic, Yves.
Yeah, it's a great question, Jonathan. And I think that the biggest problem is the stigma mental illness still has at the moment. Nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody wants to deal with it. And that's probably the biggest hurdle. And, in the UK, you guys are usually quite advanced. In the UK, you have this mental ill health spotter programs that help you spotting when somebody struggles. There are signs. Quite often they're very similar to performance problems, and that's the big problem, because we turn around and say, oh, that person can't lift their weight anymore, they just don't produce anymore, they get tired too quickly, because that's really what it is. People start disconnecting, they get tired, they can't concentrate or focus anymore. They struggle in delivering, and very, very, very often, in most cases, it's put down as a performance problem, because even if you talk with the employee or a friend or a person, they might not realize it either. They just say, I'm just a little tired at the moment, I'm a little stressed. And it's important to see those first signs. I'm not a doctor. I always recommend that people do ask medical help for it. I think the moment you feel it, you feel these signs where things are just not normal anymore. I mean, you function for 45 years and all of a sudden you're tired when you get up, and you don't want to go to work, and you're struggling with your partner and you can't get things done. And you need to have that self-awareness to go and ask for help. And asking for help is absolutely critical. And unfortunately, sometimes people ask for help in the wrong way. It might be that they do something to themselves as a cry of help, which quite often is too late already. So my recommendation is always, don't just put things down as a performance problem. I mean, take your time to talk with somebody. What's happening, how's your family life going, how are relationships going outside of work, and how are you really feeling, and then point them in the right direction to find help. We're not qualified to help, or at least I'm not, but I can help people in realizing something is wrong that is beyond workplace performance, and to look for help. But our first and foremost role is prevention. And a lot of what we can do in the workplace is about prevention. And it's small things. It's small things like, make sure people have fun when they come to work. Make sure they have the tools to do their job, have regulated working hours, have good relationships at work, have to do a meaningful job, make sure they have line of sight between their work and where your organization is going. All the principles that Gallup has already been preaching about for the last 250 years are the same ones that help people in keeping an emotional well-being. So prevention is really important. And if you can give people a couple of additional coping mechanisms, such as mindfulness or small practices like gratitude practices, because not everything is bad in life. And if you can get people to a point where every morning they can get up and just think about one thing they're grateful for, that can go a long way.
Great, Yves. Thank you very much. We've got one last question. John, would you like to take the last question before we close the session?
Yeah, certainly. This last question from Puya, I hope I pronounced that properly. How does one stay within an emotion instead of jumping to find a solution?
Oh, that's a very, very deep question. It's the only way to navigate your emotion is by staying with them, because you can't push them away. And when I talked about below the line and above the line, it's all about mindsets and shifting your mindsets. So if your mindset is resistance, right? I don't want to feel that. I don't want to deal with that. There's this saying, right? What you resist persists. And what you have to find is acceptance. And for me, probably the most powerful acceptance practice is self-compassion. And self-compassion is probably the most foreign concept in the Western world, because most of us have grown up in an environment where already in school we had to be the best and the fastest and the quickest with the best grades and everything, and chastising ourselves. Now, parents told us you have to be better. Most of us have grown up in that environment, and we still do it to ourselves today. So if things go wrong, we are our biggest critiques. And quite often, if you write down once how you talk to yourself, sometimes you will never talk to your best friend like that. And self-compassion is all about, when those emotions are coming up. Christine Neff was one of the main researchers in self-compassion. She said, first thing, bring mindfulness to your emotions, which means experience the emotion, but don't grab onto it. Then the second one is common humanity. You can tell yourself, this is hard, this is difficult. But you know what? I'm probably not the only person in this world who's ever experienced that. And then the third one is self-kindness. Maybe talking nicely to yourself. And it's a very foreign concept for many people in the West, because people think self-compassion makes you weak, makes you soft. But every single piece of research about self-compassion tells you the opposite. Self-compassion fosters a growth mindset. It makes you learning from failure. It makes you more committed to work. There's a number of research pieces out there. So I'm a big proponent of self-compassion that helps you to find acceptance and stay with emotions.
Great. Thank you very much, Yves. This brings us to the end of the recorded part of the session. Normally my wrap up is, I would say, pretty straightforward and easy, but you've covered so many different things here, and I've been scribbling lots of notes all the way through. And I know that, we've only touched the surface, and you do programs on this, which are, many hours long and over several weeks in order to bring people thoroughly on board with something like this. But if I may, I'll try and, do a quick wrap up around, try, if one is interested in this area, in order to bring more focus and sense of being grounded and aware in the moment in their lives, they can integrate it on a daily practice, which can be very simple, very low barrier to entry. That is something that they could do at their desk or, at home, or whenever possible. If they would like to bring it into their organizations, especially around it's connecting with the values of the organization, is very important. So obviously there needs to be alignment there, but if they want more of an open environment in terms of trust and safety and the ability to speak openly and share openly, especially in cultures which foster creativity and innovation, it's a very good practice to instill. And obviously it reduces turnover and increases employee engagement as well. So there are lots of support for these kind of initiatives when people want to bring them into the organizations. Around neuroplasticity, you mentioned that this is basically an evolution opportunity in terms of, engaging in growth opportunities for ourselves and for other individuals within our team. Obviously, it's a preventative tool for burnout. There are obviously many other tools as well, but it's one that is proven, has the opportunity to take on the self-reflection of being able to look at one's emotions and observe them and see where one is in that curve. And if there is a risk, then one should raise the red flag early enough to prevent the onslaught of burnout. Also, you mentioned the below the line and above the line, which I like in terms of, the below the line is more of the focus and the impression of ego, whereas the above the line is the opportunity to kind of reflect and stand back from the situation and take on new things. I've probably missed a lot. Feel free to add, Yves, in terms of my close before we kind of close the official part of the session.
No, I think you did a fabulous job here. Thanks very much, Jonathan.
Okay. Well, I'd like to say just officially before we open this up, a big thank you to the co-hosts, John Hazan from Atlas Coaching and Chris Mumford from Service Leadership and Hokuso, and Yves Givel from Hyatt on today's session on mindfulness. Please keep an eye on our website for the posting of this session as a recording, podcast and article, and we'll make sure we include a lot of the references that Yves made to different sources that will help you along on the mindfulness journey if you'd like to embark on it in the notes section of whatever we publish. So without further ado, I'd like to thank you for joining this part of the recorded part of the session today, and we're going to stop the recording.